Welcome to Underground Press, how Portland's independent publications of the 70s and 80s gave voice to the counterculture. I'm really excited to present our host and creator of the event tonight, Melissa Delzio. Melissa has been a friend and a colleague of mine for years and years. I was trying to think of when I first came across her work and couldn't remember which of the many volunteer projects that she's done for this city that was on. But a few of them have been our working with AIGA and our DMOB networking series. She was involved with creating a beautiful series of books about Portland called Our Portland Story, getting illustrators and designers and writers together to create a publication about these pieces of our history. And then now through teaching here at PNCA, where Melissa teaches design art history and mentors some of our thesis students in graphic design. Melissa's committed, funny, fun, a great motivator of people. That's probably why we're all here, excited about this. And is probably a bit of a hoarder because the collection of magazines out there is like pretty serious. Either that or she knows a lot of beautiful hoarders, like all of us. And she's going to do better justice to her project than I will do, but you can check out her work with her studio Meldel. Some of you will be learning from her in classes. And without further ado, I want to present Melissa Delzio.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. You can hear me okay? All right. So up front, I wanted to thank you, Kristen. Kristen was basically my mentor when I started at AIGA as a little volunteer. She was on the board and much wiser, and she definitely coached me on how to be a board member. So many other things. Thank you, Kristen. So Kristen runs the design program here at PNCA, so welcome to her space. And this event is part of Portland Design Month, which AIGA is hosting, and there's some AIGA friends in the house, so thank you so much to AIGA for giving us this platform. Real quick, I just wanted to kind of introduce the Portland Design History Project. I started this project over 10 years ago when I saw the need for there to be a community resource showcasing designers' work that was being forgotten in the wave of the digital revolution. Since 2014, I have conducted dozens of interviews, scanned hundreds of pieces of work, dug through many archives, and along with some students here and at PSU, written 12 biographies of prominent figures or brands in the Portland design community. So you can check out Portland Design History and scroll through all of the lovely content that I have up there. The publications on display here are not all represented yet because it's a lot of work, but they will be. $1 is right there, and there will be one for Clinton Street and the Scribe and Just Out as well. So look for that coming soon. So on the agenda for today is we're going to look at these 4 publications, which are at the fair next door. So hopefully you already got a peek at them, or maybe you will after the talk. It's going to stay open till 8 p.m., so plenty of time to browse the publications. So these 4 publications are the Portland Scribe, $1, Clinton Street Quarterly, and Just Out. I will also share a little bit in this intro about the Willamette Bridge. It was a foundational publication, and it had a big impact, so I'm going to kind of introduce the underground press to you through the lens of Willamette Bridge. Just a note, I selected publications for this event that had design impact, that were longer running, and that showed diverse storytelling where I was able to interview key members. And before further ado, I wanted to let you know that the folks that I interviewed and the folks whose work is on display are mostly sitting in the front row here, and a few of you are scattered throughout the VIPs. And I'm going to ask them to do a little wave and an intro at the very end. So this event would not happen without their generosity and their many decades of amazing work, which we're going to dive into now. And hopefully they won't heckle me or correct me or throw anything at me if I get something wrong. So I wanted to also note that the time period here, the area of focus, these publications, some of them go, as you can see, just out, goes really long. We are focusing on the 70s and 80s. I also know of at least 10 other publications that are operating in this area of focus. So just because the ones I called out today are what I'm presenting on doesn't mean that it's this is all inclusive. There's a lot more for me to work on. Okay, so introducing you all to the underground press. So the underground press was part of a national trend. The underground press in Portland was part of a national trend. This bubble kicked off in 1965 with a handful of papers and increased to several hundred publications in just a few short years. Circulations of 10,000 plus were common, putting the total subscribers of the underground press in the US in the millions. Here are some of the earliest papers. Historians declared that the underground press in the US underwent one of the most spontaneous and aggressive explosions of growth in publishing history. The press was the outcome of the counterculture movement of the 60s, but also helped define and shape movements. Driving the papers was the urgency of the Vietnam War, a flood of youthful exuberance, since a large portion of baby boomers were entering their 20s, and democratizing technologies. As the form came into its own in the 70s, the design and illustrations became much more expressive. Design historian and member of the 60s underground press himself, Steve Heller, says in his book, Growing Up Underground, this remarkable period of counterculture journalism marked one of the most democratic periods in American history. The underground label gave a nod to the subversive content and the anti-war practice of draft dodging. The book Smoking Typewriters about the rise of the underground said that the word appealed to self-styled cultural outlaws, freelance intellectuals, dissenters, artists, and musicians. But as Paulina Olson notes, the author of Portland in the 60s, most were not underground at all. They circulated freely among millions of readers who couldn't get the news that mattered to them any other way. For all the Portland papers we will look at, the writers and artists have mixed feelings about the term underground. Rupert Kennard of Just Out likes the term underground because queer people were not given a voice in mainstream media. The folks at Clinton Street Quarterly didn't consider themselves underground, but founding member Lenny D did participate in the underground press previously at New York's Rat. They considered the Quarterly independent media. Some folks are going to see themselves maybe for the first time in many years. Michael Wells, seated here in the hat of the Willamette Bridge and Portland Scribe, claimed, "We denied being an underground paper, but couldn't think of a better word." But ironically, Portland's first paper in this genre, the Willamette Bridge, literally was made underground before moving to the second floor of the building at 6th and Burnside. Willamette Bridge's layout tables and darkroom were in the basement of the Green Mitten, which was a shop run by Michael and Mary Wells. So Portland's Willamette Bridge, which we just saw the basement photo of there, launched in 1968, and the Portland Scribe followed in 72. This was the later side of the underground press boom. Why was Portland late to the party? Some folks I interviewed cited Portland being smaller, less diverse, more conservative. The Vietnam War draft, which didn't end until 73, and Kent State shootings are specifically what galvanized the Portland counterculture. To kick off Portland's underground press movement, Willamette Bridge founder Michael Wells and his then wife Mary looked to Dave Calhoun, who had just come down from Seattle to start KBOO. He offered up $500 that he was supposed to spend on medical school and started a paper instead. In the early days when the bridge was run out of the green mitten, the typewriters were on a counter in the storefront, and the damp basement was devoted to production. Affordability played a key role in the boom, and most of the folks I talked to started up their papers with between $300 and $500. The underground press in Portland rode the wave of the offset revolution, the era of paste up, for those of you who remember it well. Instead of hot metal lead type, which was the method of the mainstream newspapers, the underground press used cold type. Type went from lead to film. This led to the DIY tradition of these underground papers. It was not necessary to learn the design trade or invest in expensive machinery to produce a publication. The design process and result itself is part of what made the underground press radical. The experimentation that took place within the pages of the press, the slapdash approach, flew in the face of modernist edicts. An art critic once described these nights as a Dada experience. In Portland, production nights at the Willamette Bridge were described similarly by Maurice Isherman. He said, the bridge was a hodgepodge of stylistic decisions, and that was the point. They favored the plain spoken and the truth rather than straight margins. Content from the papers came from local authors and artists, but they also, the underground press often subscribed to Liberation News Service and other subscription packs that you could get graphics and also national news. The underground press differentiated themselves from the mainstream by daring to defy journalistic norms of objectivity. They talked to the readers as you would a friend, assuming shared values. Willamette Bridge in issue 1 declared, "We will not attempt to appear objective about material we have definite feelings about." And this is the first issue of the Willamette Bridge, which was the first Portland paper of this genre. And they had this all ready to go, and Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated. And so they had to completely wipe clean what they had done and start over with a different cover. So it's an ominous start to their first issue. Selling the papers of the underground press was the job of street vendors, hippies, and teenagers sold the paper for extra cash. It has been said that Simpsons creator Matt Groening sold the Willamette Bridge in high school. And later, his comics were published first by the underground press in LA, though. This is not Matt Groening, just so you know. I don't know who that is. In addition to earning some cash, street vendors were often the face of the movement. Lenny D. from Clinton Street Quarterly said, "When you come to a community, there were street vendors everywhere. Papers had a direct relationship to a certain community, so you would kind of find your people through the papers." The photo on the right is from the Portland police files. The police would try to cite sellers for illegal vending because there was a strange law against teenage girls selling papers after 9 p.m. But only girls were not allowed. And the police would wait until it turned 9 and just to get them. The underground papers did face harassment from police, politicians, and even the FBI tried to stir things up at the Willamette Bridge. So the Willamette Bridge was a foundational paper for Portland. It had 10,000 distribution reach at its height, but when readership fell and finances suffered, it folded in 1971. But the paper sowed the seeds of the underground in Portland, and that grew into what's next. So now I'd like to take you through the 4 main publications, starting with the Scribe. The Scribe may not have been the first, but it launched with large format, eye-catching covers and lasted as a weekly publication for 7 long years, 72 to 78. The design was scrappy, just like the rotating cast of characters who contributed. They had radical visions of running the paper as a collective and saw the publication as the community in the form of words and paper. The Scribe, like the Bridge, was started by Michael Wells, who was back in town with his wife Mary and toddler twins, who are here today. There they are. They're all grown up. In tow, after a brief stint that they had on the East Coast. The Wells had left town claiming they never wanted to run a newspaper again, but on their return, they saw that, okay, I guess no one's doing this, and we left town, and we'll start a paper again. So they started the Scribe. Portland needed a paper. This time they could do it better. The Scribe attracted a range of characters from the 70s counterculture, aka the New Left. Many of them clashed with each other. In the words of illustrator Bob Reaney, the Scribe reflected an uneasy alliance of writers and art screwballs, cartoonists and musicians, dropouts and readies, drifters, politicos, feminists, hippies, and punks. They all had one thing in common. They were motivated by change. Scribe writer and renowned author Tamim Ansari wrote a book inspired by his years at the Scribe, starting from when he first walked through the doors as a young Reed College graduate. In the book Sinking the Ark, the book Sinking the Ark is a biographical fiction of the Rose City Ark, the fictionalized Scribe. I highly recommend this book. It is a very fun ride, a very accurate portrayal of this era and the cast of Portland characters at this underground newspaper. There's one on a table in the publication fair, so you can get it on Amazon. Also, it should be a movie. Somebody make it a movie, please. Writers Maurice Isherman and Tamim Ansari both describe a sense of living on edge after years of violence in the 60s and early 70s. They felt like they were rebuilding and reshaping a new world in the wake of the old. Tamim said everyone could feel the momentous shift the planet was what was going on the planet. The weight of this responsibility could be what drove some of the hotter internal debates. On newsprint, photos rarely come out looking very good. So this put a premium on drawings. Luckily, the Scribe had a secret weapon with Anita Bigelow, who's giggling in the front. She was fresh from Reed College and classes at the San Francisco Art Institute. She said, creatively, she had free reign. Some of her cover illustrations represented her own political ideas, and many may not even relate to the articles inside. She remembers writing her own stories, too, and going on adventures with photographer Doreen Labby, whose photos supported many stories. On production night, there was 28 paper art boards that the text columns would be affixed to using melted wax. A character in Tamim's Sinking the Ark says about production, "It's very intuitive. You just have to let your body get into it and keep your mind out of the way. You just cut up the copy into columns, wax the back, and lay them down. The paper will start to feel warm against your palm." The content highlighted a lot of what might feel familiar in Portland today: support of independent music and business, gardening, the outdoors, recipes, food, tattoos, protests about freeway developments, nuclear sites, and airport expansion. And of course, there was content that is truly of the 70s, like Free Patty Hearst and countless Nixon caricatures, articles raising consciousness of the Indigenous peoples movement at Wounded Knee. The Scribe showed up in support of the farm workers movement and showed support for the local Black Panther movement. It should be said that while these counterculture organizations in Portland supported each other's causes, the organizations themselves were quite segregated. There was always a balance between the local culture and the political content. A 1973 reader survey had some Portlanders asking for more high-quality radical articles, while others said, quote, "The political trip gets a bit wearing at times, you know." Illustrator Bob Rini describes each issue as irreverent and eye-popping, jammed with provocation, underground comics, poetry, a bar and tavern guide, movie listings, and reviews of jazz, rock and roll, and this new thing called punk. The Scribe, at its height, had a circulation of between 5,000 and 6,000, and they made their money from advertising, subscribers, and of course those street sellers. All of the money went back into the publication, with only a few staff getting paid between $5 and $25 a week. In the beginning, under Michael and Mary, the Scribe had a feminist perspective. It was baked into their own values. A 1972 article prepares the reader for the Woman's Scribe issue. They ask the reader to question sex-determined roles conditioned into us all from childhood. Quote, "The ideological stirring up of centuries of patriarchal sludge might arouse in the reader everything from wonder to fear to respect." After 2 years of work on the Scribe, Michael and Mary moved on to the newly formed and robustly funded Willamette Week in 1974. After they left, the Scribe's feminist leanings and really the entire structure of the Scribe was in flux. Female characters in the book Sinking the Ark, the fictional Scribe, describe this inflection point. They point out that while many volunteers and staff on the paper were women, the articles were still mostly written by men. The men agree it's a problem, but claim it's not a problem they can solve at the Ark. It's a problem in the culture. The main character pauses at this argument and responds, "Do you mean we have to wait until sexism has been eradicated from American culture before we can begin to deal with it at the Ark?" These internal debates did seem to show results, with many Scribe issues devoted to several aspects of women's lived experience, from abortion to childbirth, karate meetups, and vaginal ecology. So in the power vacuum of the Wells departure, and with the Vietnam War waning, which was a driving force of rebellion, an existential crisis became imminent at the Scribe. It became necessary to host a Saturday meeting to deal with the various personalities. A 1974 issue discussed the week the Scribe didn't come out. Collective decision-making can be a frustrating, painful, and lengthy process. But if it is endured, the group involved emerges as a strong, less fragmented force. Meanwhile, at the fictional Ark, the main character states, "No bosses, no barriers, no gurus, no fixed roles. Tear down the walls and let the paper breathe like an organism, we say." The paper ran as a collective for 4 more years. On their 5th anniversary, Sherry Sylvester wrote, "The Scribe remains not only as a local phenomena, but also one of the few alternative papers in the country which did not succumb to slickism or porno." So rather than the design quality declining into oblivion in the later issues, the last issues of the Scribe feel monumental. Illustrations vary in style and hand, but artist Bob Rini's work sticks out. The Scribe came to a rather abrupt end in 1978. Financial woes were ever present during the Scribe's run, despite being run mostly on volunteer labor. They tried many creative ideas to stay afloat. There was benefit concerts, square dance benefits, belly dancing benefits. The Scribe even started up a typesetting service. Despite all this, the Scribe was declared dead in 1978. An Oregonian article flatly reported IRS bill kills Scribe. Scribers today reflect on how they found community at the Scribe. Tamim Ansari was a fresh graduate from Reed College when he joined. He said, I was from Afghanistan. I knew nobody in America. I'd come when I was 16. I was a complete freak. So I was very pleased to discover that there was a whole movement of people who call themselves freaks. So I made friends. They were the incipient counterculture, the people of Portland, and that was my life. The Scribe may have died, but the writers, designers, and illustrators lived on, and many stayed in publishing thanks to their Scribe tenure. Almost all the newspapers in town in the 70s had former Scribe people on their staff. The Scribe was a platform for our next publication that we're going to look at, $1 Magazine. In the landscape of Portland's print media, $1 was a comet streaming through the 70s, aglow with flashy design, unafraid of hot takes, and overloaded with creative talent. In its short life, it shone bright in the world of Portland's alternative press and kicked off a few creative careers in its wake. The $1 story here that I'm presenting today is a little more abbreviated because, as I mentioned, I have a full deep dive on my website with lots of visuals and everything. So I'm giving a speed version today. And quick acknowledgement to Albina Music Trust and Bobby, who has a table out there. Go say hi to him because Bobby helped hook me up with some scanning on these. Dreaming of writing for magazines, Jake Keel walked into the Portland Scribe offices. He was in search of a writing job, but they could only offer him a job as an ad salesman. Since Jake had set his sights higher, he declined. But later he met Mark Christensen and learned that Mark had taken that job. Mark was a salesman at the Scribe just to get his foot in the door, but he was soon entrusted to take on writing assignments, getting articles published almost every week. Jake had a new magazine forming in his mind, a city magazine like Milton Glazer's New York, but with an entertainment focus like Rolling Stone or Esquire. He wanted it to be punchy and funny, so he found a business manager to front the startup money, and he turned to his friend Mark to ask him to be the editor. $1 was founded as a Portland monthly magazine of the entertainment and the arts in 1973. The introduction of the first issue plainly states, we have done what we can to see that this is more than just an expanded alcoholics version of the Yellow Pages or a fawning conduit for advertisers. If we feel a restaurant's service is poor, we will tell you. $1 is not welded to rigid format, partisan politics, outside business interests, or the occult. So don't mess around. Under Mark's leadership as editor, the stories took on a provocative approach. They ran stories like The Mayor's First Acid Trip and Sometimes a Great Lotion, a guide to Portland's pornography. Heather thought that was funny. Years later, the Oregonian would describe Mark's style as a pedal-to-the-floor editing. Mark remembers, of course, you couldn't be provocative all the time. You had to be mindful not to freak out the advertisers. So you had to pace it out. $1's bread and butter was arts and entertainment articles and music interviews and reviews. Their claim to fame was they were the first publication to interview the band Kiss in May of 1974. The interview was published, written by $1 regular contributor John Shirley, who went on to become the originator of the cyberpunk science fiction and write the screenplay for The Crow. $1 magazine gave Rolling Stone contributing editor and author Michael Gilmore his start. In 1976, Michael wrote a long essay about Jennifer LaBianco's independent music magazine for Portland called Rag Mag. Jennifer would go on to become Portland punk royalty as the guitarist for the Neo Boys in 1978. One key to $1 stellar layouts, in addition to Jake's chops, was photographer Clyde Keller. Clyde had already become a prominent photographer with a unique photojournalistic style that captured the likes of Robert F. Kennedy, who he had followed on the campaign trail, and later Ken Kesey. Mark remembered the free-form way he shot, often not even looking through the viewfinder. He shot photos like movie directors shot film, real life in black and white. The headline typography of $1 was diverse and often expressive of 1970s trends. Jake, art director, lamented, "I had a tendency to change the logo all the time." He eventually settled on a hand-drawn type reflective of the type from the actual $1 bill. He recalls the careful layouts he made on artboards, setting them in place using spray mount, which he regretfully said will kill him eventually. If you're angry about this article, Mark is right over here. Some of my favorite spreads are the ones that are dripping with satire, dark humor, or that are just snarky. Like, "Why is Beaverton so ugly?" Or the May 1975 article, "Is Portland dull?" Followed up by, I love this, 50 very good reasons why Portland is the most exciting city in Multnomah County. There were serious articles too, challenging the Trojan nuclear plant, an interview with a trans woman, a story about the plight of temp workers. So it was all about balance. Mark, Jake, and the team kept the publication going for 3 years. Despite the success, $1 magazine folded in September of 1976. In a familiar storyline, they ran out of cash. Jake described his design experience at $1 as an unpaid college education that led him to the kind of work he dreamed of, a long career in magazine design that took him coast to coast. Jake's work at $1 rocketed his future success as art director at Rolling Stone and We magazine. Similarly, Mark Christensen, whose writing career extended to a variety of Portland publications, was launched to the national stage, also writing for Rolling Stone, Wired, and Playboy, as well as authoring 8 books. Mark and Jake continued to work together across their careers, collaborating on more local and national magazines and books. Their resumes remained entwined, a rock star designer-writer duo. Jake says, "They were lucky. We rode a freewheeling wave of post-hippie years gonzo journalism that made us all, if not rich, well, not poor either." Looking back, Jake says these were the best times of his life. It has been said that Clinton Street Quarterly was formed after sifting through the ashes of the Portland Scribe and declaring that, quote, "No city should survive without an outlet for the radically creative and the creatively radical literary arts." But founding publisher Lenny D. of the Clinton Street Theater Collective, that lent its name to the publication, said the project was born from an unlikely source. He recalls leaving a Bruce Springsteen concert and feeling deeply moved. "I left that concert saying, I want to do something where I leave nothing behind." Lenny saw the limitations of what the theater could do to enact social change and thought a paper could be a better vehicle for a countercultural connection. He was always interested in journalism and had worked on The Rat, an early publication of the underground press in New York City. And he knew firsthand that underground papers had a direct relationship to community building. In spring of '79, Lenny D. leaned on a friend, future cinematographer Eric Edwards, who had design chops to produce issue 1 of what would become a legendary quarterly publication. As Lenny established the founding team, he knew there was a vast amount of untapped talent in Portland that needed a broader outlet for exposure. The purpose of the quarterly was to give that talent a chance to show itself and show its wisdom. The paper was designed to be political, but to not feel stuffy. They gave artists free rein to express themselves in ways that weren't on offer at other publications. With this ethos, they laid out its mission with the first issue of the paper, acknowledging the shifting times. Quote, "Now that we are no longer radical chic, there is a new trend to groove with the times, staying alive, if you will. We believe the traditions of the fabled press of yesteryear, of hootin' and hollerin', and championing ideas whose times are more than overdue." Issue 1 topics range from disco hall reviews to President Carter's inflation crisis. A few key people joined early and largely remained in some role every issue. David Milholland, Jill Blashfield, Lenny D, and Peggy Lindquist. Lenny remembers the team assembling very organically. For writing, design, and illustration, the group leaned into their personal connections, who happen to be A-listers of Portland's creative community. With artists at the heart of the publication, these pages sing with beauty, humor, irony, and thoughtful journalism. The quarterly's approach to editorial was from the community up and was free-form by nature. The writer friends passed along much of the content that they were excited about. Catherine Dunn wanted to write about boxing, so they gave her a platform years before she hit it big with her best-selling novel, Geek Love. Lenny himself was interested in sports and wrote extensively about the Blazers. He also loved the band the Holy Modal Rounders, so they get a feature. There was a wide rotating cast of artists and writers contributing each issue. The masthead was a game of musical chairs with various staff members assuming different titles issue to issue. The Portland music scene was a common topic, especially with punk bands emerging. A spring 1981 feature on punk rock in Portland was featured an interview with Neo Boys' Kim Kincaid. The Neo Boys was an all-female punk new wave band, one of Portland's oldest. The feature on the right is about the KBOO radio station, and again highlights the connection between the community radio stations and the independent press in Portland, long established since the Scribe days. The quarterly was unafraid to give comics equal space to more traditional writing. The underground comic movement was still in its stride. They published comics by Bennett Norbo and Linda Berry, who was living in Seattle at this time. The comics balanced out deeper topics, literally, like this article about the nuclear submarine that is still to this day parked in the Puget Sound. And I just learned about it when reading this article. I had no idea there was a nuclear submarine in Puget Sound. The editors rarely assigned a story. To round out the submitted content, Lenny would visit the library and scour all of the magazines. When there was an article he liked that brought a thoughtful perspective, he would reach out to the author and get permission to reprint. This broadened the paper's authorship to include national and international figures like Carlos Fuentes, Neil Postman, Allen Ginsberg, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Michael Ventura. And of course, because they were a paper that was published by the Clinton Street Theater Collective founder, they, of course, showcased all the Clinton Theater movies that were coming up. And each issue had a different way in which the theater listings were designed. The quarterly got a glow up on issue 4 when Jim Blashfield entered the scene. His cover paired with a comic on the interior. The humor was deemed strange by his colleagues, but Jim was not deterred. He was happy to do what amused him. The strength of his design skills were clear from the start. and kept him on the roster, first as a designer, then as an editor. Jim ushered in a larger format, bold color, strict grid, contemporary design, and quirky humor. And he led on art direction. He called his design process rather improvisational and would make no preparatory drawings. Jim thought the designer had a lot of power, as they were the last person to touch the paper before it went to print. Jim had some design experience from living in the Bay Area, working with Bill Graham on Fillmore posters in the psychedelic style. And you can see his posters right now at the Portland Art Museum on their psychedelic poster exhibit. But as for designing a full publication, like many others of the independent media, Jim had no previous experience. He says he studied Rolling Stone for page inspiration. It was natural for Jim to infuse color coming from psychedelic San Francisco, but he said it was nerve-wracking to experiment with color on newsprint. Jim said the expressive nature of design was intuitive to him. Spreads that were more serious or political would be more conservatively designed, and others could be more dynamic with striking diagonals. The paper had a centerfold dedicated 100% to art. It was a wide canvas for creative exploration. Jim's covers are often more photo montage with layers of texture, found objects like scissors or clippings collaged from other magazines. Popular Mechanics was a favorite source of clippings. Jim's quirky sense of humor started filtering in with issues like the fall of 1982 that contain a series of satirical infomercials promoting things like growing your own mold cultures in your home, which I did for free. Tabloid spoof pages followed with headlines like, "Midlife Crisis Brings Grisly End." Looking back over 40 years later, he says, "You see why I like working on the Clinton Street Quarterly? I just got to do this." Shown on the right is the actual pasteboard, and that is on display at the publication fair at the table over there. So check that out. Jim saved the board. Jim went on to great success as a filmmaker, creating music videos for world-class talents, including Paul Simon, Joni Mitchell, Talking Heads, and Michael Jackson. He wants to primarily be known as a filmmaker, but his decades' worth of literary and artistic contributions to the Quarterly are formidable. The Quarterly sought a wide variety of artists' contributors. A few became some of the top names in Portland's fine art world. Henk Pander was a Dutch artist who moved to Portland in 1965. Upon arrival, Henk discovered an avant-garde theater troupe and started designing posters and sets for them. He quickly became a go-to illustrator for underground papers like the Willamette Bridge. Years later, friends connected to Clinton Street Quarterly were sure to bring him in. He illustrated a newly birthed baby, a satirical TriMet bus wrap proposal, complete with typography composed of rats, and this otherworldly composition that paired with a feature article about the artist. Henk described how the counterculture community in Portland freed him as an artist, allowing him to produce work in a way he never could have if he stayed in the Netherlands. Another artist whose illustrators are front and center from issue 1 is Isaka Shamsuddin. Isaka is renowned for capturing the rich lives and histories of the African diaspora in his paintings, murals, and community projects. Isaka was already an accomplished artist in Portland as far back as 1976, as evidenced in this cover of the Scribe, featuring him and his work. Isaka is less known for his commercial illustration work. His 1972 issue 2 cover of the Quarterly features a comic celebrating the outcome of a Portland school board decision to change its desegregation plan and policies in the face of a boycott. AIGA's output overall ranges from political cartoons like this one exposing power company greed fed by public officials, to his dynamic portrayal of Charles Mingus, shows more painterly illustration explorations. There are way too many artists in the quarterly to talk about each one, but I'm going to highlight very quickly three more. Now a Pulitzer Prize-winning political cartoonist and founding staff member of Politico, Matt Worker, got his start doing political cartoons for Willamette Week. And as an early artist at Will Vinton's animation studio, he met Jim Blashfield and the Quarterly crew. Matt contributed pieces like this complex satirical work called El Salvador the Game. Portland design bigwig Steve Sandstrom tried his hand at editorial illustration for the Quarterly before he went on to lead his own design studio, Sandstrom Design. Steve remembers, "I could drop the drawings off at Lenny's house where the dining room table had been converted into space to lay out the paper. It was a grassroots operation. It was for the community and by the community of thoughtful, caring, and talented people." In the fall of 1980, Gus Van Sant illustrated this page with layout by Eric Allen Edwards, not knowing that a decade or so later, they would collaborate on a much bigger project, the cult classic film My Own Private Idaho, with Gus as director and Eric as cinematographer. With all these talented artists collaborating, it's no wonder the Quarterly was a resounding success, at least in hearts and minds. The Quarterly won more than 60 awards from the Society of Professional Journalists, at least 2 in the illustrating category every year. As early as the fall of 1982, the core of the Quarterly team was seeking to expand. They had an in the Seattle market with a writer who sought Seattle articles, and importantly, a new slew of advertisers with this new market. The idea was that the main elements of the publication would remain the same across the 2 issues, but ads and a few articles would differ. The Seattle edition of Clinton Street Quarterly lasted 24 issues. Later came the Minneapolis issue, which was its own beast entirely. It came about when a local Minneapolis publisher discovered the Quarterly and contacted Lenny to ask if they would consider branching out to Minneapolis. So Lenny left the Clinton Street Theater in 1985, moved to Minneapolis in 88 to produce the Minneapolis version of the Quarterly. And he built a whole new team in Minneapolis to do this. There were stylistic differences to the Minneapolis publication, but the general content and ethos resonated with what Lenny developed here. Despite the acclaim, the energy, the reach, the quality, the Quarterly always struggled financially. Same story. Lenny recalls the many years he ran Clinton Street Theater and Clinton Street Quarterly and slept on the couch at the Quarterly office. The publication continued until 1990, when, in Lenny's words, it just became too hard to keep up. Decades later, you can still tell he feels the loss of it. The long-term impact of the Quarterly has to primarily be the connections made within the creative community. The 80s was a fertile place for Portland creatives. Artists, writers, designers grew stronger and were boosted and connected through publications like Clinton Street Quarterly. And the final publication we'll look at today is Just Out. Just Out started in 1983 as a monthly paper for the queer community devoted to intersectional ideas. Just Out went on to publish for 30 years. Just Out was one of the longest continually operated women-owned business in Portland and one of the few LGBTQ plus publications that remained independent through most of its run. The need for the queer press in Portland rose because mass media publications of the 1960s rarely acknowledged gay people or only in regard to police crackdowns on gay bars. But a 1972 study showed that Portland was home to 50,000 homosexuals, of who 8,000 were said to be out. The community was there and hungry for media that reflected them. The Willamette Bridge was an early supporter of the gay liberation movement, with bridge writer John Wilkinson publishing a letter in response to a personal ad that was submitted to the bridge. John saw in the personal ad the pain and sadness of the writer and knew that there was a community need for connection. In the bridge, he proposed a meeting in March of 1970 to discuss the formation of a political and social action group of homosexuals. From this, the Portland Gay Liberation Front was formed, the first gay political group in Oregon. While the counterculture movement of the 70s faded away for many in the 80s, for members of the queer community and the folks at Just Out, their movement was just getting started. Just Out was founded by Renee LaChance and Jay Brown, both who had editorial roles at the Cascade Voice. The Cascade Voice was a gay publication that had started up the previous year with broad hopes for intersectionality, but Renee and Jay became frustrated with the lack of follow-through on this promise. Renee felt she was prevented from writing articles challenging gay men to examine their own internalized sexism and racism. It was clear to Renee and Jay that Cascade Voice was not going to properly stand up for anyone but white gay men. After one last tense conversation, Renee declared she was launching her own paper, and she immediately tapped Jay and designer Rupert Kennard, who had done illustration work for The Voice, to join her. Jay and Rupert were happy to help her build something new. Rupert describes doubting at first if they could pull it off. The Cascade Voice was a big queer paper in town. Could Portland support another? Their vision was simple: good writing, good design, inclusive perspectives, and integrity. Together, they started the paper, $300, it seems to be the magic number. They made from selling Jay's couch and a go-getter gumption, according to Renee. The very first issue announced their intentions on highlighting every facet of the lesbian and gay community. The commitment to entertainment, though, was clear from the very first cover, featuring an exclusive interview with the Dyketones. The Dyketones were a spoof 50s band that started in Portland and went on to national acclaim. With this cover and the stunning interior layouts by Rupert, Just Out made waves from the start. One excited reader wrote in, "It looks like Portland finally has the excellent paper its strong gay community has long deserved." Like other alternative papers, Just Out was scrappy and resourceful. Unlike other papers, they had to deal with many added struggles, like having multiple printers refuse to print their work. Rather than scrapping one particular print vendor, they fought back, educated the vendor about their own homophobia, and they won the right to go back on printing. Once printed, publications that were stacked around town were vulnerable to anti-gay crusaders who would throw away large piles of the publication. Many subscribed to Just Out by mail, but had to be careful receiving it if they were not out to their friends and family. Originally, the papers were sent to subscribers in discreet envelopes, but starting in 1985, they announced, "Just Out comes out." Subscribers would be getting a folded paper in the mail, sans envelope. The paper encouraged trepidatious readers to look to the content within the pages, find pride and strength to come out. Despite these challenges, Just Out was finding surprising success in securing advertisers. They had to look for advertisers beyond the gay bars that funded the other papers. To accomplish this, they hired a straight white man who had experience selling ads for the Business Journal. He saw the niche market and the loyal readers as a huge selling point. Other queer publications thought it was impossible to get mainstream advertisers, but Just Out proved otherwise. With the publication in full swing, they were able to address tough intersectional issues like gender and masculinity, like this March 85 issue titled Men versus Women. Why aren't more men feminists? A topic they revisited in 1995, The Great Divide. Just Out made good on promises made from the start of the paper, writing features about older gays, gays in prison, gays and alcoholism, physically challenged gays, and unlearning racism. The editorial process was collaborative, with Renee, Jay, and other contributors taking a critical look at story proposals and asking, was it queer? Was it news? Did it represent marginalized communities within our community? Just Out also featured news blurbs from gay communities across the US and internationally, and ran many syndicated articles from national papers, especially when it came to big, complicated matters of national health, like the growing AIDS epidemic. A 1986 article describes AIDS as a plague worsened by, quote, a patchwork of neglect and panic by the Reagan administration, which was scared to be seen as supporting homosexuality. Another longtime Just Out staffer and illustrator and designer, Anne Hines, illustrated this 1986 cover featuring this topic, showing a chessboard pieces of the AIDS game represented as homophobia, loss of loved ones, medical research, and missiles, indicating that the global political forces had ripple effects through all public policy. Rupert and Anne alternated in their work on the covers and graphics for Just Out, collaborating across many years. When Rupert was asked to reflect on the content of the paper that was impactful, he said, or what content of the paper was most impactful, he said all of it. The fact that they could cover issues like healthcare or religion or the arts or whatever and find the queer slant to it. With pride, Rupert said, those first couple of issues of Just Out made it so clear what the commitment was to. Because of all of this, Anne's illustration talent and Rupert's art direction and design skills, Just Out won a Gay Press Award for Best Design. One very special issue of Just Out in 1984 featured Rupert's own cathartic comic strip that he created years earlier for his college paper. As a young Black comic book fan, Rupert noticed the absence of Black superheroes, so he decided to create his own. The Brown Bomber emerged with a goal of being a different type of superhero, one that preached nonviolence and challenged readers about white privilege. As Rupert was exiting college at the height of the comic strip's popularity on campus, the Brown Bomber came out as gay, mimicking Rupert's own journey coming to acceptance and pride as a gay man. Later, the Brown Bomber was formalized as Cathartic Comics, and in Portland, on the pages of Just Out, Rupert made space for a new character to be born, Diva Touche Flambe, a Black lesbian cosmic spirit. Through comic storytelling printed on the pages of Just Out and other queer publications across the US, Rupert was able to express himself and educate and build awareness around Black and queer stories. If you're interested in learning more about Cathartic Comics, there's a new book Rupert's just finishing that's coming out through Stack Deck Press, and there are a stack of little postcards about that on the registration table in the publication fair. So look out for that. Here they are taking over the cover of Just Out. The paper underwent several redesigns, and art director responsibilities bounced from Rupert to Anne when Rupert lived in San Francisco for many years. From the rotated masthead of the early issues to the late 80s hero image with table of contents to the full cover headline and later issues which shared space with the start of the article. So 30 years, lots of design changes. One of Just Out's earliest journalistic successes was in '86 when they aided in the takedown of a homophobic Multnomah County Commissioner, Gordon Shadburn. Just Out discovered that Gordon was in fact having homosexual affairs in addition to misappropriating county funds. They got all their information on their story, all of their reporting, turned it over to Willamette Week, and Willamette Week exposed the commissioner and ran him out of office. All of their hard work in the early years paid off when in 1988 they became the first gay paper to get press credentials at the Democratic National Convention. The AIDS epidemic first appeared in Oregon and nationally in 1981, and it hit the small community of Just Out hard. Renee remembers that every third gay man you knew was sick or dying. Many were ostracized from their families, and so the gay community would provide caregiving. The staff of Just Out was affected by AIDS personally. Co-founder Jay Brown died of complications from AIDS, age 54, in April of 1990. Renee was left without a partner she had built the paper with for 7 years. Just Out started covering the activism around AIDS awareness, including the work by Portland chapter of ACT UP. ACT UP was a group based in New York City that used disruptive and creative events, provocative events, and advertising to bring AIDS issue to the attention of the masses and demand action by the government. One of the underlying missions from the start of the paper was to get people to come out. And in 1991, in one of Renee's proudest reflections, together with their partners, they made the bold move to take out a billboard on North Broadway by the Memorial Coliseum. The billboard said, "Come out." This was a celebratory moment after many years of struggle. The Just Out team didn't know that the bonds built through their AIDS activism would prepare them for battles of another kind. Measure 8, 9, and 13, all brought by a conservative group, Oregon Citizens Alliance, in 88, 92, and 94, respectively. All were in service of banning civil rights protections to queer people. Measure 9 was particularly brutal. It was one of the most, that was in 92, it was one of the most comprehensive and harshest anti-gay measures put to voters in American history. Just Out's campaign mission was twofold: try to keep the community informed and keep the community together. The paper was loaded with resources, announcements, opinion pieces, and activist opportunities. And in November of 92, Just Out proudly announced the resounding defeat of Measure 9, with 57% of Oregon voters denouncing it. Part of the campaign's success was due to the people who had come out in the period of leading up to Measure 9 to their family and friends. Renee, while proud of her work, was exhausted emotionally from running the paper for all those years and by the deaths of colleagues to AIDS. In addition to fighting the plague, Renee had to stand strong against the constant political battles as well. It takes a lot of your spirit to keep fighting the same battle over and over, she said. So in 1998, Renee sold the paper to Marty Davis. Despite going on to be a very divisive character, Marty would run the paper for 14 years and steer the publication into the digital age, posting PDF issues online, before selling to a final owner who kept the paper alive just one more year. In addition to falling victim to digital replacing print, the paper was a victim to the success of the LGBTQ plus movement. Founder Jay Brown had jokingly predicted, quote, "When the Oregonian starts printing our news, there won't be a need for Just Out." But in the absence of Just Out, Renee and Rupert still feel something was lost. When Just Out ceased operation in December of 2013. It was 30 years old. Despite all the heavy content the paper had to contend with, what strikes me most, and maybe will strike you as you flip through them, is how joyful and vibrant most issues were. There was such a strong commitment to the arts, to queer families, to the broad spectrum of community members, that you really get a sense of the paper as being a living being full of complexity. In Renee's sign-off letter, she wrote of the paper's impact in 1983. Oh, sorry. She wrote of the paper's impact. In 1983, Just Out joined a militant genre of journalism to free oppressed minorities and speak out against the powers that oppress. As basic human rights have been incrementally won and lost, national gay and lesbian leaders have welcomed assimilation. The warriors of the 80s have softened and tired. A new generation must take their place. I thought I would end this presentation with this 1988 photo from a Portland Alliance article that shows an assortment of alternative press papers spilling on the ground here. Hopefully not what's happening at the publication fair right now. You can see Just Out, Clinton Street Quarterly, the Scribe's in there too. The caption of this photo says, "May our collective voices continue to sing out in the rich polyphonic harmony in the face of the monotones of mass media mystifications. Join the chorus." That's it. That's all I've got. A few quick notes here. Thank you so much. Thank you to our sponsors, Adobe, the Portland Mercury, Cameron Winery, and Lazy Days Brewing. Very appreciate all of you. Also, thank you to all of these people and institutions who made this happen. All of the libraries and archives in town, and then many of the people that are in this room. And of course, to my husband, Ryan, who's also the DJ. So I'm gonna introduce some of the VIPs really quick, and we'll do a very quick Q&A and get you back to the publication fair, which is going until 8 p.m. in the Lemelson studio. So just over here to the left. There's drinks and snacks, music by DJ Slouch, and Albina Music Trust, and volumes I think are all still set up over there. All right, so I'm just gonna give a few words about a few people. So bear with me, and when I call you, just give a little wave. So we have some really important people in the room who founded, authored, designed these publications. Mary Wells. We should probably clap at the end, or else we'll be here forever. But Mary deserves a great round of applause. Mary is a founding member of Willamette Bridge and Portland Scribe. She took charge of design and production for the earliest publications from the basement of her Burnside storefront and later above ground at Willamette Week. Also amazing collage artist, creating unreal landscapes out of paper. Anita Bigelow. Thank you. Anita was responsible for the outstanding illustration work from the early scribes, featuring everything from international political takes to arcade games. Anita is a master of calligraphy and makes handcrafted artist books. Mark Christensen is the scribe salesman. Wave your hand, Mark. Scribe salesman turned rock star editor of $1, who went on to have a long career as author of novels, nonfiction books, and writing for many national publications like Rolling Stone and Wired. Lenny D. as a founding member of Clinton Street Quarterly and was part of Clinton Street Theater Collective. His keen vision and commitment to the arts is what made the Quarterly the platform that it was. Jim Blashfield was by Lenny's side from the early days, drastically altering the design aesthetic of the Quarterly for maximum impact before he went on to fame as a filmmaker, animator, and director. Oh, I forgot I had pictures here. Behind the scenes pictures. David Milholland worked tirelessly writing for most of Clinton Street Quarterly's existence, and together with Lenny defined the voice of the Quarterly. Renee Lachance co-founded Just Out and served in an editorial role for 15 years. She helped lead community protests and gatherings to build awareness about the AIDS pandemic and encourage the community to come out and be proud. Rupert Kennard, was by Renee's side at the start of Just Out, taking the lead on design, introducing Portland and the nation to the first Black queer superheroes. Rupert later took his layout and art direction talents to Willamette Week and SF Weekly, among many others. So big round of applause for all of these amazing, talented people. I know we're short on time. Do you want to do like 2 questions, Kristen? Okay. If anyone has a question with a quick answer, and if it's something that the VIPs are better to answer, I will pass it.
I'll walk around with that's a hot mic. I'll walk around and you guys can use this hot mic to answer or ask your question too. Just kind of like wave at me.
Can we get a picture with all the VIPs? Can we get all the VIPs together up in the front?
VIPs, don't leave this room until we take a picture, please.
Good call.
Thank you. If we don't have questions, we can... I got a question. Okay.
So who's with me? Let's do it all again.
Oh. Renee is starting a new publication.
You heard it here first.
I'm in.
Is that a good note to end on?
Yeah, let's
all right, thank you,
it off to you
everybody.
all.